Today's lesson is lesson 104, and it is rounding decimals to the nearest whole number. Now, we have very recently done rounding fractions to the nearest whole number, and this is almost identical. You're just working with decimal numbers instead of with fractions. So I think you're going to find this nice and easy for tonight. Now go ahead and, like we did with the fractions, up at the top of your page, go ahead and write a number line. And put a big line, a small line in the middle, and then another big line. And let's just put some numbers in here. We'll put 7 right here and 8 right here. Those are our whole numbers. Now, if we were dealing with rounding fractions, this would be 7 and a half, right in the middle. But we're not dealing with fractions, we're dealing with decimals. Now, I hope you can remember what the decimal equivalent to 1/2 is. If you remember, go ahead and write it below. And hopefully you wrote 7 and 5/10, or 7.5 is how we would say it when we're actually talking about it. So, if you can remember that the 5/10 is equal to the 1/2, you will be fine, because you can then remember anything from 0.5 and up will round to the nearest whole number up. Anything from less than 0.5, less than 5/10, would stay the same at the whole number. So in other words, if you were looking at 7 and 3/10, well, clearly that would round to 7. Whereas if you are looking at 7 and 6/10, well, that is greater than the 5, so that would round to the 8. Now, if you remember, when we are doing rounding for our percentages, I say if there's anything after the 5. So even if you had 7 and 51/100ths, well, that's enough to be greater than 5 and greater. So that would round up to 8 as well, because they're all going up once you are at that 7 and 5/10, or the whole number and 5/10. So let's do a few practices together just to make sure you're catching whether it's greater than 5/10 or 5/10 or greater, or whether it's less than 5/10. Now this also works with money, except in money it would be 50 cents. So if I said, what is this amount to the nearest dollar? Hopefully you would say it would round to $8. And if I said, how about $15.05, what would that round to? Hopefully you wrote down straight $15, because notice the 5 is in the hundredths position, not in the tenths position. So this one right here, the one we would be looking at, is a 0. Well, a 0 is clearly less than a 5, whereas right here we looked at the 5, and that was clearly enough to bump us up. So don't get confused. Watch that you're getting the tenths, which is the first number after the decimal. So how about, let's go just a couple that are straight decimal numbers. How about, what would 4 and 75/100ths round to? Well, hopefully you said A5 again, because right here that 7 is 5 or greater, so we go up. And last one, 12 and 3/10. What would it round to? Well, give you that clue right there. And you would say, well, it's got to stay at 12. It can't round up because I haven't reached that 5/10, that 0.5 mark. Now in today's lesson, they're going to be asking you to round numbers in order to estimate area or estimate volume or estimate perimeter, anything. If you've got a decimal, you know how now to round it up. So if I were to say I've got a rectangle that is 7.3 inches long and 2.7 inches wide. What would be my perimeter of this rectangle? Well, hopefully you would remember perimeter is length plus width plus width. And in this case, that would mean I'd round it and go 7 plus 7 plus, I'm going to round up here, and that would round to a 3. 3 plus 3, well, 14 plus 6 equals 20 inches. And now if we were to jump to area equals length times width. And in this case, that would mean my rounding here of 7 times my rounding here of 3 equals 21 inches. And area, remember, is square. Whenever you're doing area, it's going to be square because basically we would be breaking it up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're breaking it up into square pieces, and in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 1, 2, 3 is 21 inches squared. Now again, they didn't ask us for the exact area. They said what is an estimate of the area. For this one, they said what is an estimate of the perimeter. So be careful. If they ask you what is the area, you have to do the whole multiplication with the decimals. If they say what is the perimeter, you have to do the whole addition with the decimals. But if they ask you for an estimate, then you go ahead and round everything to get to your estimate. Now, if we were to do the same thing, except let's make it a three-dimensional shape, and we have 5.2 centimeters and 1.9 centimeters and 4, whoops, sorry about that, and 4.5 centimeters. Well, if they were going to be asking me to estimate the volume, well, our volume equals length times width times height. So I would, because they've said what is the approximate or what is the estimated volume, I would say length, my 5.2 would round to a 5 centimeters. My 1.9 would round to 2 centimeters. And my 4.5, what would that round to? Hopefully you said 5 centimeters. So here I would say 5 times 2 is 10, times 2 is 50. So my volume is 50 centimeters. Do I have it correct? Hopefully you said no, and that you said centimeters cubed or cubed centimeters. By the way, here's your hint. You had 3 you had 3, that's going to be cubed. When you have the 2, it's going to be squared. So just be sure you're watching out. Again, if they would have said, what is the exact volume? I would have had to put 5.2 times 1.9 times 4.5. Because they said, what is the approximate? I'm able to round them all. So hopefully you're seeing how that'll work with when you're actually working with real numbers, not just giving a rounding number, but when you're actually having to use it. So let's end with just a reminder, you don't need to put this in your notes, but whenever you are rounding fractions or decimals, your key is that 1/2 in a fraction and a 0.5 in a decimal, which is 5/10, which is actually 1/2. Here and up, you go to this number, and if it is less than that 0.5, you're going to go to the number before. So make sure you're watching that number line. 1/2 and 0.5 are your keys. Have a fabulous night.